Before you, my friends, is the one vehicle that generated the most interests and inquiries and questions, at least directed at me, in calendar year 2022. This is, obviously introductions are not necessary, this is a 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5. And just so you know, the following cars that I got the most questions on in the last 12 months, Ford Mustang Mach-E, Volkswagen ID4, and Kia EV6. And strangely, I guess that's kind of says a lot about me. The EV6 is my favorite of the four, and it's the one of those four that got the fewest questions. Whatever. The thing with the Ioniq 5 is that, I mean, as I just said, it doesn't need an introduction because Hyundai nailed the design. Even now, a year later, it still turns head, and it still gets my attention every time I see one, which is kind of impressive. Now, just so you know, right now I'm plugged into the 100 kilowatt charging station, and although this car is capable of ultra high speed charging, it's only downing, I think the last time I checked, it's kind of silly doing this right now, 43 kilowatts, which is a little bit disappointing because I have been plugged in for, 12 minutes. So it should be, and I only started charging, state of charge was only 34% when I got here. So I figured, you know, speaking of charging stations, I just experienced something that a lot of EV owners, well, this is not news, are going to live through, at least until the infrastructure itself and the charging network, you know, grows in number of charging stations. I had to do three fast-speed charging stations before I found this one. You know, you figure like on a 100 kilowatt, people are going to be plugged in for 10, 12 minutes, at the most 20 if they're at zero, right? And so I'm checking my app and I drive out to the nearest ones to my home, only to find that on at least two of those places which had both 150 kilowatt charging stations, that there was a lineup of cars waiting to get a charge. We are about a month away from the holidays, so I'm thinking that, and it is the weekend because this past week was very busy, so I'm thinking a lot of EV owners are going to have to deal with that in the near future, at least for the foreseeable future anyway. But given that most charging, 75+% of the charging actually happens at home, it's not entirely an issue. Okay, so many words as always. The thing with the Ioniq and Hyundai Motor Group vehicles in general is that they front load the product. They give you big numbers, amazing design, but corners are cut everywhere. And I guessed correctly, after spending a week with this car almost now, that remains true for the EVs. Because look, I can just give you a brief idea. I'm still blown away by the design, but the moment I stepped into this car, I had the impression that I was getting behind the wheel of a cheap rental car. I swear to you, and it sounds harsh, but it's the reality. And then, worse, when I drove off, the car felt and sounded like a cheap rental car. It's horrible, but it's the reality, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, as the cost of these things, well, is settling, but is not dropping. Anyhow, so in the following video, as per the norm, we'll do a quick tour of the car. I'm going to leave it plugged in because I need the juice. And then I'm going to take it for a spin once it's, I don't know, right around 80-82%, I guess. And I'll point out a few things why I think, well, Hyundai's MO to cut corners is still alive and well even in these cars. So here we go. I know you can't see that. At least things are improving. It's been 21 minutes and we're charging at 79 kilowatts, so that's pretty good. We'll mark that up as a win. It's still a little bit disappointing given that for 2023, actually, the Ioniq 5 is equipped with ultra-fast charging, the 800-volt business, as standard compared to 2022. I guess this is the right time to talk about pricing. So in Canada, it is pricing for the base car, which is now the preferred. There's no essential anymore. Starts at $51,650, give or take. The equivalent car in the US is $41,450. And if you step up to the top trim with all-wheel drive and all the bells and whistles, you're looking at $63,500. In Canada, $57,650. in the US. So, I mean, the basic equipment is absolutely complete. This is kind of weird not moving because I'm plugged in. 19-inch wheels, a dual 12.3-inch screen. You get the power driver's seat. You get the heat pump, which is now standard as well. What else? Heated steering wheel, heated front seats. I mean, the level of equipment is complete. Yeah, this is very weird because I'm plugged in, but I mean, just a word on the design. There's so many elements to what Hyundai has done that, I mean, you know, the details are immense, enormous, over the top. But still, I mean, it just works, and I don't know what they're going to do for the follow-up to this car, but it's going to be weird because Hyundai's usual, again, MO is to completely reinvent the car, even though the model has just been introduced. They've done that with the Elantra, the Sonata, and, you know, to varying levels of success. Maybe they'll learn a lesson with EVs. I seriously doubt it. Just so you know, I mean, the vehicle is actually fairly long. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, you know, I've seen a bunch, but I never realized how long the wheelbase is. That's 3 meters across the wheelbase. It's huge. There are no overhangs on this thing per se, which is kind of nuts. And the 19s look ginormous. Well, that's because the tires, I have winters on there right now. I mean, they're 235 section, 55 sidewalls, which they look like truck tires. I mean, I think this was Motor Trend's SUV of the year. I don't want to consider it an SUV, but I guess that's just a matter of opinion. It's not an SUV, it's a hatchback. Point final. At least that's what I'm thinking. What else can I tell you about the design? I won't show you the frunk. There's a 24-liter frunk up front, which is more or less useless. So there's a trunk, dirty trunk. So that, according to Hyundai, is 770 liters. I can see most of it. I mean, it's really, really wide, fairly deep. There is this storage. I can do this under the floor, so that can be helpful. Now I'm gonna lose my gloves under here. Take that out. Okay. A major advantage, I mean, to that massive wheelbase is an enormous back seat. And I mean, there's so much room that, I mean, the kids can easily walk through, and with the flat floor, which is not unusual. There's, you know, they're having a good time. Visibility is actually really good for them too. And I mean, the seat backs recline, so I can get the seats nice and flush against the bottom and the top part of the seat. Guess that's it for the rear. Now, the front, look, you get your power driver's seat. The seats are actually fairly comfortable. They're very plush. Lots of adjustments, including the power lumbar, which is great. Other details. Normally you'd have like a grab handle, right, to close the door, but there isn't one. There is one, but it's the whole length of the armrest. So that means you can grab it, you know, up here when you're sitting, or as you're getting into the car, you can grab it there. Stupid details, but important things. Good door bins. Let's slide in the board. Here's your twin 12.3-inch display, which is part of the problem, I think, now, but only because I have the advantage of being, you know, of driving these cars on a regular basis. This is still super high tech, but it's already nearly played out. And there's a strange thing that's going on here. I mean, plastics are nice, but suddenly you go beyond the texture and you realize that it's, you know, fairly cheap stuff. It's not flimsy, but in 2 years from now, it's not going to be. The newness is going to quickly wear off. Never mind that it's a little bit dirty there, but you know. And then when you take you take stock of the door panels themselves, there's nothing going on there. They're great details that you can't see. But anyway, even so. So your HVAC controls are all here. You have some hard menu buttons. Okay, so I can do that. I mean, it's fairly simple. There isn't anything, you know, crazy about the layout. It all works. That's what really matters. You know, your EV function, I guess that's one thing. So you know, closest charging station, your range, depending on what you're using. Vehicle to load if you want to do that. Drive mode button right here. It's kind of strange. Can I turn the wheel? I'm plugged in. I can't start it. All right. Yeah, so your drive mode, so the screen display changes with it. I've been driving 90% in normal, a little bit in eco, and even less in sport. And I haven't tried snow. This is a rear-wheel drive model, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. There isn't much else to say. I mean, the storage bin down here is really, really way out of the way. So it's not entirely useful, but this is fantastic for, as you can see, gloves, masks, purses, and all that. And there's more storage right here as well. But it's that uniform plastic that really gives the impression that it's cheap. And when you start touching some of the surfaces, I don't think that's going to age very well. The same thing with the top of the dashboard. There's a very big expanse there. I don't know. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is when you drive off, and we're going to do that in a few minutes. Alrighty then. So we were plugged in just for fun on a 100 kilowatt station, as you saw, for 34 minutes and got all of 32 kilowatts to refill the 58 kilowatt hour battery. Again, slightly disappointing because this car with the ultra fast speed charging capability on a 50 kilowatt hour charger should go from like 10 to 80% in like 45 minutes. That's not exactly what we just experienced. And if you're on an ultra fast 350 kilowatt hour charger, you should be able to go from 10 to 80 in I think it's 18 minutes. But that's not what we're experiencing, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it. It's cool outside, but it's not cold. Actually, according to the Ioniq 5, it's 3 degrees Celsius, so it's not that bad. It's actually, well, for us Canadians, it's tolerable. Anyhow, so yeah, 58 kilowatt hour battery. When it's on a full charge, range is supposed to be up to 354 kilometers. 83%, 259 indicated kilometers of range. And when I last had it fully charged, I think it was like 98 or 99%, I was at, I think it was 320 kilometers. So the cold is definitely having an effect. In fact, up until just now, the charge, I only got about 170 kilometers on about 60% of the battery, or 70%. Wait, I was down to 30. So 65%. I mean, yeah, the weather is definitely having an effect on the range, and that is to be expected. I did also mention this is a rear-wheel drive model, so it's good for 168 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, rear-mounted engine, which is kind of cool when you consider other EVs which only have the electric motor mounted in the front. It has made for interesting driving when the snow hit the ground the first time just this, well, I don't know, 4 days ago. Given that this is like a 42 or 400 pound car, yes, you do have that instant throttle response, and I did mention that I'm doing most of my driving in a normal drive mode and not in sport. Allow the pedestrians to go by because I'm that kind of guy. But yeah, this is not the rip-roaring EV that most of us get to review on a regular basis. If you do want that, once you step into the larger 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, horsepower goes up to 225, torque remains the same at 258. But then if you go for the all-wheel drive version, which is the last one I drove 10 months ago, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then you jump into, I think it's 320 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque. So now you're looking at a proper 5-second 0 to 100 kilometer an hour car. But this is, at least the output, this is the people's EV. And as far as performance is concerned, range, I think it's not that far off. I will admit that I've been using the heated steering wheel regularly, and the heat's been on essentially all week because temperatures have been, in fact, hovering between 3 or 4 degrees Celsius and -8 or 9 overnight. Now, just so you know, right, so it's McPherson suspension, struts in the front, multi-link in the rear. I mean, the handling of the car is fine, but that's not the issue. That's not what made me feel or remind me that this is, I don't know how to put it properly, hastily, it's not hastily built. The corner cutting. I'm going to stick to that corner cutting because as soon as I drove off, the passenger seat started rattling and shaking. I seem to have found, after adjusting it 4 or 5 times, a position where it no longer shakes. Not so crazy, but what's really unfortunate is the rear hatch or thereabouts that has a tremendous rattle that is just, it's disturbing. Hey, Maki, look at that. That is just disturbing and unpleasant, and reminds me that the build quality of this thing, it's not going to stand the test of time. I let him go. I just let him go. And another thing, like another corner cutting thing, which is unacceptable, and this is not news either, I'm just bringing it up because it's all the more real. And I mean, in the moment now, no rear wiper is one of the most ridiculous oversights ever. I mean, the back glass is filthy right now, and even when there's snow on it and I put the defrost, right, what happens is the snow melts, and if the defrost doesn't turn off quickly enough, or I don't shut it off quickly enough, once the water or the snow is gone, then it just dries up and it becomes murky and mucky. And rear visibility isn't helped because the rear camera is exposed. So when I go into reverse, I can't see very much out of there, and I can't see very much out of the camera. That's like something that shouldn't happen in 2023. I mean, we're weeks away from 2023. Otherwise, steering and brakes are great. Brake regen. In this car, there are 4 different modes. So there's essentially, now I'm off. So it's full coast, which can be very useful when you just don't want to touch anything. There's level 1, 2, 3, and then I-pedal drive, which could be maybe a little bit more aggressive, but that's just a matter of, working into your brain distances and speeds and all that. And it becomes fairly intuitive. I actually like downshifting, so that's level 2, level 3, and that means I'm in I-pedal, 1-pedal drive. Ride quality, if I get back to that, isn't all that bad. But despite the size of the sidewalls in this car, I mean, the ride is just a notch too harsh, which isn't helping the situation with the rattle in the hatch right now. I mean, this road, the boulevard, is actually fairly good, so it's not too bad. But look, overall, I'd have a hard time figuring or accepting the rattles and the cheapness. This is not so unusual. That thing, in my opinion, has an uglier and cheaper interior, and it's a lot more expensive, or more or less. They start right around the same price point, but as soon as you pack on options on there, and I'm not talking about the GT, it gets a lot pricier than even the top trim all-wheel drive version of this. The strange thing with EVs, and this is the answer that I give everyone that asks me about them, is that these, and I've said this before, these EVs, this one and the Mach-E behind me, are the crappiest EVs we will ever have in the history of the automobile as it evolves towards EVs. Is it? No, it's not moving. Technology. They will all be better drivers, more range, more performance, better equipment, better built overall. So I wouldn't buy an EV now. There might be an exception or two that I would risk, and I have said that about the EV6, but the Ioniq 5 is making me realize that one, Polestar 2, would be on my short list, perhaps. But there's another thing too. I'm blabbing, but whatever. That's what I do. Right now is a good time to buy an EV because you get a bunch of incentives and all that, and tax breaks, and all of those deals and rebates are all going to disappear in the next few years once EV sales actually reach a certain point. We're not there yet, mostly because there are no EVs available to purchase. You can put your name down on a list for this, and maybe you'll get it in 18 or 24 months. Maybe. I don't think you can hear it. I can hear it, but the road's still not that bad. Anyhow, that's that. I mean, do you buy an Ioniq 5? Yeah. I mean, just expect to pay ridiculous amounts of interest for it. Do you buy a Model Y or a Model 3? I would not. Build quality is no better than this. The performance in every other respect is better. I mean, everything else is a matter of preference. If you can hold on to your internal combustion engine car for a few more years, I would definitely do that instead of buying an EV or getting on a list for an EV. And yeah, because in a few years from now, they'll be so much more interesting and appealing overall, bar none. That's it. I'm done.